Sabrina 2000s comic, issue 62. Sabrina's happy about the first snow of the year. How? Snow is cold. Salem has every reason to hate it as a result. She says Salem hates everything. I like him, he's relatable. And he's stuck as a cat, he has every right to be negative. A stuffed animal cat at that, how can he eat like that? He mocked Sabrina for thinking that everything is so cute and wonderful. She's lucky. She wants to hold a slumber party with hot chocolate and movies, and he doesn't like it because it sounds girly. Out of complete nowhere, Salem retroactively reveals that every time she's at a sleepover with Landra, they ended up in a huge argument. Why does the writer want to ruin Landra's character? I'm getting concerned here. At least her not getting along with Sabrina gives her something new to her character. They're finally doing something with her, but she deserves better than this. How could they get into an argument over the rules of truth or dare? That's a simple game. I guess this is a harmless version of Salem. I mean, it's not constantly annoying her with his magic like in the animated series, but why is he even here? He's only there to make Sabrina look like an idiot because he has better judgment than her. Somehow, Sabrina's still stupid enough to refuse to listen to Salem. Speaking of that, she says she's in too good a mood to get upset. The idiot explains that she's just excited about the winter dance coming up. Salem says it sounds like trouble. That only makes sense because she's caught in the middle of a love triangle. Otherwise, it's stupid. Although, is it even a love triangle at this point when Harvey suddenly doesn't love her anymore? Sabrina thanks her friends for coming, and Gwen is relatable when she admits that she's never been to a slumber party before. I always liked that she had black and red hair. She stands out. It was so obviously based on shadow. I guess it works because she's a girl. She's a good audience surrogate being told about witch stuff. She asks how many witches are there, and I'm disappointed that the writer's too lazy to even provide a vague answer. Instead, Sabrina just has quite a view, instead of easily saying billions. Without Landra's approval, she's told about the magical realm, where there's a mana tree out of complete nowhere that provides all of the magical energy. That's like the giant wand in Fairly Odd Parents, and is also ripping off Sword of Mana's mana tree. So I can accept it a bit from familiarity, but again, it's establishing retroactive continuity. She's told that one of the members of the Magic Council is an elf queen, and her appearance is chilled. I'm supposed to believe she's a good person, but she doesn't take the hint when Gwen says that this is all too much to take in. She doesn't have to tell her that there's tons of other magical beings too. If all the magic comes from one mana tree instead of a wand that can be repaired after it gets broken, I have to assume there's a force field above it to protect it from being destroyed by lightning at any second. How is Sabrina not sure if mortals can go into the other realm for a visit? Of course they're not allowed to. This comic splits Chloe into two different characters, which means that we're stuck with two less interesting characters. Mortals have broken into the magic realm before, and it's always had bad results. Sabrina says Gwen doesn't count, and I think that they're all very lucky no invisible spy witches are here to see this. I assume. It'd make sense if that was the case. How else can witches even find out about the abuses of magic if that doesn't happen? But it'd be very plot convenient for the sake of having a plot about this if they weren't being spied on. And it'd also make it inexcusable whenever she is punished because she was spied on. Gwen's told to go downstairs because her mom wants to call her. Landra's upset with Sabrina and says that if she cares about Gwen, she should protect her by not telling her anything. Was she not told that Gwen found out about magic without it being Sabrina's fault? How would she be protecting her by not telling her she's a witch anyways? Landra would have been told that it wasn't a matter of Sabrina telling her about witches. What she should be written to say is that Sabrina should erase her memory of that witch experience because the Witches' Council would want her to, and she would get in trouble if she didn't. Logically. Rather than treating Sabrina like a bad guy. This is cringeworthy to watch because it's such an obvious conflict ball. You can drive a wedge between two friends without it being forced, can't you? It turns out that if Gwen was discovered, it'd be Hilda who'd have to erase her memory of witchcraft if she discovered she knew about magic. Because drama! We can't not have drama anymore, like was easily the case earlier. Is anyone gonna reference Chloe? How about Uncle Quigley? Sabrina should be saying that she misses Chloe and how she knew about magic, That could provide a strong excuse for why she's letting Gwen into her life so much. And it could even be explained that Chloe's memory of witchcraft was wiped, which it logically would be. Do they just literally rely on witches reporting to the police? Then most of it wouldn't be found out about in the mortal realm. But if Chloe's memory was erased, Sabrina would have no reason to risk dealing with that again. Landry tells Gwen that they should talk about something else for a while. Then the slumber party becomes typical, as Sabrina asks Gwen which guy she likes. Why is Sabrina happily asking Landry which guy she likes? Sabrina decides to go to the dance with whichever guy asks her first. And Landry calls her out that it's not fair to both guys to keep them guessing all the time. Even if she's right now, why does she have to annoy her at literally every opportunity where she could disagree with her? She doesn't believe in being polite. Sabrina points out that she can't help it if they both like her, completely ignoring her point. Also, she looks delusional by thinking that Harvey likes her in this comic. Suddenly, she's told that she's not the center of the universe. You don't have to derail a character into an antagonist to make them interesting. I don't know how anybody would want Sabrina to turn into a melodrama. Gwen hits Sabrina with a pillow instead of Landra, thankfully. Sabrina was in the wrong after all. Gwen says it's silly to argue about things like this. She's told that pillow fights only happen in the movies. I wouldn't know. At least she was useful by cheering them up. And she gets covered in pillows. Sabrina thinks in bed at night that she just doesn't want to hurt the feelings of either guy because she cares about them both. Why would she think she was hurting Harvey's feelings by dating someone else? He doesn't care enough about her to date her regardless of what anyone thinks. She thinks of Landra as being too sensitive and nosy. Go figure, Landra likes Shinji and wishes she could tell Sabrina. I don't know why anyone wants to date him. His hair's so long for one, and he's an idiot. Sabrina can't focus on her test because she's too busy wondering why neither guy has asked her out yet. This isn't the 50s. It's just an algebra test. I don't care. After that waste of a page where we really didn't need to know her inner thoughts at every opportunity instead of the plot moving along, Gwen asks Sabrina to help decorate the gym. Sabrina is finally asked why she won't simply ask out one of the guys herself. And she relatably says that if she was turned down, she'd be embarrassed. Gwen actually asks her if she could just cast a love spell on one of them, and has to be told that love spells in mind control is outlawed. Since when? It makes sense. But since when has Sabrina ever been punished for those spells in the entire history of the franchise? I really wish this writer wrote a different franchise, and it wasn't called Sabrina at all. Because the series has been around for too long to just mold it into whatever you think it should be. Why don't witches completely get rid of the ability of other witches to use mind-controlled love spells? I just have to assume that's impossible. But we're supposed to believe that witches are omnipotent anyways. Sabrina's sad that the dance is starting in 15 minutes and no one's asked her. Suddenly Shinji's not interested in her anymore? It's so forgettable that the comic suddenly has Harvey be really shy with girls now just because of changed art styles. That's a depressing change. It's also very forgettable that Harvey isn't her boyfriend in this comic. She's humiliated at not having a date. This just feels so arbitrary. Why can't she at least think to conjure up a guy to go to the dance with? Zelda says you don't need a date to have a good time. People were shocked when she showed up at the ball a long time ago without a man. And she had one of the best nights ever, and some of the guys wished they were with her. She's not explaining why she enjoyed herself alone, so I just have to assume that the dancing and punch were good enough for her. Her complete lack of evidence for why she would enjoy the ball alone somehow cheers Sabrina up. And somehow Sabrina comes to the conclusion that she'll be able to dance with both guys, when they didn't care about her enough to ask her out. Zelda should have expected her to miss her point. Gwen comforts Sabrina at the dance because she doesn't have a date either. You know what? I've been holding off on saying this because it might be controversial, but I'm bored and frustrated enough with Shinji at this point, so fuck it. I wish Shinji looked like this instead. I'd actually understand why Sabrina would want to date him then. Alas, it's a kid's comic, so there's no chance that they could ever get away with her having Gwen as a love interest back then. Just because it's the 2000s, they couldn't possibly have gotten away with having a main character in a high school who likes both genders. I understand why she's torn between two guys because it's escapist fantasy because teenage girls like the comic, and it's only appealing to them. So even if they did think they were allowed to do this, Gwen is not a guy that the audience would like to date. I just don't know why the audience would like to date Shinji though. His design makes me uncomfortable. At least if it was Gwen, it would be very interesting. She wouldn't be an annoying character who constantly betrays her. She apologizes to Gwen, sympathizing with her, and Gwen encourages her to dance and have fun. She has a better dynamic with her than Landra and Shinji do. It just feels unfair that her only friends are people who don't get along with her and don't do anything but let her down. Sabrina thinks it's hot in here, and somehow, Harvey is dancing with another girl. He's somehow dumb enough to happily introduce Sabrina to her, as if she'd be okay with this. Even 70s Harvey wasn't this dumb. This story randomly makes him forget that Sabrina loves him, just to cause Sabrina angst. Sabrina thinks that she thought he liked her, for no reason. I was hoping she was his cousin, but instead he was taking her out as a favor because freshmen can't get into the dance otherwise. Sabrina's relieved that doesn't mean anything. Still, you'd think that he would think he isn't allowed to date her for any reason. And when you read ahead in the comic, there's actually an excuse for why he didn't date Sabrina a lot earlier, and that excuse makes it especially confusing that he went out with this girl. Because if he thinks he's not allowed to date anyone, there's no reason he would choose her instead of his best friend that's a girl. Wouldn't he care about Sabrina's feelings? I'm sure the writer didn't even think of that back then. She sees Shinji alone, and go figure, Landra was his date. She thinks of Landra as a traitor when she didn't commit to Shinji, so she didn't own him. Landra was right, she was acting like she owned both guys. She was being self-centered. But so is Landra, because she doesn't even care that Sabrina's not gonna approve of her decision. She could have very easily not decided to date Shinji. She naturally wonders why Shinji did this when she thought he liked her. Because they're not dating? But still, that's a good point. Even the character has more logic than the writer. Landra naturally calls her out. Sneaky, you're being greedy! Yeah, good point. I hope I'm not expected to think she's evil from now on. But at least if she was her enemy from now on, it wouldn't be trying to pretend that she's a proper friend I'm supposed to accept. Sabrina explains that she just didn't want to reject either. Landra says that she should have done something to keep things from turning out this way. Why isn't Shinji the one who's calling her out? I know he's attracted to her, but he can't like her that much if he decides to date someone else. She reveals that she asks Shinji to the dance, as they're fortunately not angry anymore. I'm glad Landra's not a generic villainess now. She lampshades that Sabrina really should have asked someone out herself. So this was an idiot's plot that could have easily not happened. She knows that Shinji's interested in her, he's dated her before, how is this even a thing that happened? Sabrina lampshades that she should have told her and gets her excuse for it. Sabrina realizes that she really is more conceited than she thought if she thought Shinji and Harvey were both stressing out over who would be able to take her to the dance first. We were given every single indication of that. They were acting jealous of each other the whole comic. They don't like each other. But suddenly I'm supposed to think Sabrina is right here when the writing just forced it to turn out this way. This writer is really bad at writing a believable romance drama. Suddenly introducing that she has a crush on Shinji out of nowhere, and suddenly introducing that Shinji's fine with dating someone other than Sabrina out of nowhere when he was happy to date her before. Shinji walks out of here and encourages them both to dance inside, and the next 2 pages are wasted. The story ends with Shinji looking lame and stepping on Gwen's foot. At least that's another personality trait, even if it doesn't come naturally, because he was supposed to be a cool rebel. Why is Landra giggling at this? Wouldn't she care about Gwen? At least he got humiliated for disappointing Sabrina. I'm glad Gwen's being portrayed as a sympathetic character now, because it's nice to see that from a character who's not completely skinny, but not outright fat either. I haven't seen her be the victim of a single fat joke. Or an ugly joke. So that's progressive. You're actually allowed to think of her as pretty regardless. Good thing they all cheered up. In the comedy page, Sabrina gives Salem a kitty high-rise, and because it's so big, he ends up letting a bunch of cats into it. I guess because of loneliness. It is better for the comedy pages to be at the very end, because we're invested in the story as it is, and we don't want it to be interrupted. But I think I would actually be less frustrated and bored with the comic if it was nothing but comedy pages, because then it wouldn't have one story that's dragged out way too long. and it wouldn't be taking itself too seriously. And it would require a lot more effort from the writers creatively to think up all those different comedy pages. This story was about Sabrina somehow not getting a date to the dance with Shinji, even though he dated her multiple times before, so he's clearly interested in her. And she had every reason to assume that Harvey and Shinji were stressing out over who would take her to the dance, because we know that they're jealous over their mutual affection for Sabrina. But suddenly, Shinji takes Landra to the dance when there is absolutely zero indication of the fact that Landra was in love with Shinji. It literally only looks like she didn't like him before. So, it's a confusing melodrama where bad stuff happens to Sabrina out of complete nowhere just to have a memorable melodrama. So instead of Sabrina getting to go to the dance with a date, somehow literally no guy asked her out in all of that time. Gee, I guess I'm not the only one who doesn't like her hairstyle. It really goes to show you how long these stories drag out that I end up only talking about the end of them. It's hard to even remember what happened before all of that dramatic confrontation. We didn't need to see a sleepover at all.